addiction, and we address addiction in a very different way, and that is that it is a symptom of something that is incomplete. It is an attempt to complete something that has left you incomplete, wanting or suffering in some kind of way, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, physically, so that we search out something that makes us feel good, something that will temporarily relieve some pain. And so rather than treat an addiction simply as a disease or as a phenomenon unto itself, we treat the person so that we get to the source of what had them take up that addiction in the first place. And once that gets resolved, then the symptom or the after effect, called an addiction to a substance or a habit or a way of being, is much easier to resolve. I'm not saying that it just disappears, although very often those addictive ways of being simply disappear by themselves because they're no longer needed. They were simply a crutch until the person could heal or repair something inside, and once that's healed or repaired or resolved, then the phenomenon, the after effect or side effect called an addiction, seems to disappear by itself. It's kind of like if you broke your foot and so you needed to walk with a crutch, and then once the foot is healed, you don't keep walking with the crutch. So you have a tendency to want to let that go. Okay? So we have a very unique approach to dealing with the addictive personalities that form in relationships, and we've found that most of the relationship models that you and I have received or that we've inherited from our parents and from our cultures and from our religions have a tendency to be, overwhelmingly so, codependent relationships. Relationships in which there's one person who's very important and very strong, and they're the obvious 100% person in the relationship, and then another person who is more subservient and who is the server or the enabler, who is a zero. So we have relationships in which there's a 0 and a 100%, and both people are constantly at odds with each other because they're never actually being true to their higher self. And so there's never a sense of satisfaction and completion and wholeness in those type of relationships, and they lead to other types of addictive behaviors. So maybe an addiction to the internet or to porn or to food. It's a very common addiction. You know, food, everybody can argue, well, you need food, and good food is good for you. So, but there's a lot of people who eat a lot of very good food, and so then they have another problem. They can't stop eating it, and they become overweight. They become out of sorts. They begin to not only have physical problems, but they begin to have all of the mental and emotional problems that are associated with self-esteem and lack of confidence. So they add to the dependency of the relationship. People in codependent relationships have a fundamental belief that the relationship is what's going to save them or make them whole or complete, and that relationship is their lifeline, so to speak, how they stay alive and how they survive and how they continue to be valid, if you will, in the world. And of course, nothing could be further to the truth in actual reality. You yourself as a human being are valid and are lovable and are deserving of wholeness, health, happiness, success, fulfillment, abundance, prosperity. All the good things in life are there as your birthright. You have as much right to that as any human being that has ever walked the earth. And so to not be able to stand up and claim your birthright, in other words, to not be responsible for having those things in your life, those things and people and circumstances in your life that would have you be happy and whole and fulfilled, to find yourself unable to do that, and then to blame somebody that you're in a relationship that you say you love, is the ultimate act of absurdity. It is to render a mockery of your life and of your birthright. It's as if you were walking around, if you had $1 billion in a Swiss bank account, and you were walking around as if you were in poverty because you had forgotten the account number. So we have vast riches within us, each and every one of us, and we are by birth and by divine right, I'm going to say, whole and complete and fulfilled coming into the world. And little by little, that gets conditioned out of us by our families, our circumstances, our cultures, our religions, our school teachers, our friends, our peers, our schoolmates, our co-workers. We get conditioned to believe that we're so much less. And then we hang out with and complain with people who are in the same type of condition. And so we create an environment around ourselves that seems to enforce the notion, the idea, the belief that we are in some way limited, that we are in some way less than, that we are dependent, in fact, on others for our sense of worth, for our sense of deserving or well-being, for our feeling of, for our need to fulfill our need to feel loved and appreciated. So we compromise. We end up compromising the most fundamental truths about ourselves. We never really tell the truth about ourselves. We don't tell people how we really feel. We don't tell people what we really think. And in fact, we get so used to compromising and cooperating with others in order to fit in order to feel like we belong, like we're part of a group, a family, a religion, a culture, a political system. We try so hard and we get so compromised in attempting to belong and fit in so as to feel safe. Belonging is one of our needs in life. That we end up 30, 40, 50 years down the line and we don't even know who we are. We have never had an original thought. Or had an original thought, we said, oh, that's stupid, or who are you to think that, or say that about yourself. So we dropped it, and we've taken on having thoughts, but not our own. There's a huge distinction between having thoughts, and by the way, most of the thoughts you have aren't even your own. Most of the thoughts you have are just passing through, and you've either gotten them from movies or poems or books you've read that moved you, or people of authority or people that you trusted, or even people that you didn't like who have said things, and you believe them or bought into them. And so now they become a thought that resonates in your head as if it were your own, and it's not even your own. It didn't even come from you. You didn't think most of the thoughts that you come up with. There's very, very little original thinking, like, let me sit down with myself. And this used to be the way with people. I mean, in times when we weren't so overwhelmed by outer stimuli, when we didn't have iPods and computers and telephones, well, that's a coffee cup, and all of the instruments around us, cameras, and all the things that I'm seeing in this room, when we didn't have all that stuff around and it was sort of empty, and all we had was each other and other people to kind of get a sense of who we were and to communicate with, people used to stop and reflect. People used to take the time to be quiet with themselves and to examine their own life, to examine their own values, to examine their own inner thoughts and processes. And so people had a way of kind of knowing who they were, getting a sense of their own identity and what they were about. You knew if you were a courageous person or if you were kind of cowardly, or you knew whether you were a smart person or whether you were a little slow. And either way, that was okay with you. You know, you had a sense of who you were, and that was okay. And people brought this into their communications with their brothers or sisters and co-workers, their mothers and fathers, and the people in their lives. And most of the people I know that are from this era gone by would rather have people dislike them for being who they are than to have people like them for pretending to be somebody they're not. And I certainly come from that generation. I come from that ilk, if you will. I would rather be hated for who I am than to be loved for who I am not. And so I decided a long time ago that I'm going to spend my whole life being me. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to be the best me I can possibly be. So I am going to educate myself, and I am going to take care of my health. And I am going to try to have my mind be sharper and clearer. And I am going to try to do my best to help other people and to make the world a better place. And I'm going to do my best to sharpen my skills in whatever I undertake, whether it's you know, I was a dancer for a while, I played guitar and was a singer for a while, I was an actor for a while, I was a carpenter and a builder and an architectural designer for a certain period of time in my life. So at each turn, at each thing that I attempted to take on, I took it on to the best of my ability, and I became the best that I could be at that.